We went to the store with my husband for our usual shopping. As we approached the checkout, he stepped away to take a phone call. After paying, I was about to leave when an elderly security guard approached me. "Is that your husband?" I nodded. He just quietly said, "Come with me, dear. It's about your husband. You better see this for yourself." Welcome to the channel Twists of Fate. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We're really interested. We wish you an enjoyable listen to this captivating story. Sarah woke up that morning with a slight feeling of fatigue. Outside the window, a fine autumn rain was drizzling, grey clouds hung low over the city, and it seemed the day promised to be as grey and ordinary as dozens of others. She stretched, threw off the blanket, and headed to the kitchen, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee already lingered. David, her husband, sat at the table with his phone in hand, occasionally sipping from his favorite blue mug. "Good morning," Sarah said, pouring herself some coffee. "Morning," David replied shortly, without looking up from the screen. She sat across from him, studying him. They had been together for 7 years. That seemed quite happy to her. Though lately something had changed. David had become more distant, often stayed late at work, and his phone had turned into some kind of forbidden territory. But Sarah pushed away the gloomy thoughts. Probably just tired. His job was stressful, lots of pressure. "We need to go to the store," she said, biting into a piece of toast. "The fridge is almost empty, and we need something for the weekend." David nodded, still glued to his phone. "Okay, let's go after lunch. Just need to make a couple of calls." Sarah looked at him and gave a weak smile. Always these calls, always some business. But she didn't argue. She rarely argued. Maybe that was her mistake, being too accommodating, too compliant. The day dragged on slowly. Sarah busied herself with household chores, sorting through clothes in the closet, tidying the shelves. The apartment was their shared property, but it was in her name. It turned out that way after her mother passed away and left her this 2-bedroom place in a good neighborhood. David had moved in with her then, and they started living together. The apartment was cozy, bright, with large windows overlooking an old park. Sarah loved this place. This is where her childhood happened, where she felt safe. Around 3 in the afternoon, David came out of the room, dressed and ready to go. "Well, shall we?" he asked, grabbing the car keys. Sarah quickly threw on her jacket and grabbed her bag. They went down to the car, and David started the engine. The drive to the supermarket took about 15 minutes. Light music played on the radio. David tapped his fingers on the steering wheel in rhythm, and Sarah looked out the window at the grey streets, passers-by with umbrellas, wet sidewalks. She remembered how she and David had met. It was at a corporate event with her friend. He seemed so charming, attentive, interesting back then. They talked all evening, and Sarah felt like she had finally met the right person. David was 5 years older, worked in a construction company as a sales manager, traveled a lot to sites, met with clients. He knew how to speak beautifully, how to make an impression, and Sarah fell in love quickly and unconditionally. The first years of their life together were happy. They went on vacations together, hosted evenings with friends, cooked dinners together. David was attentive, gave flowers for no reason, paid compliments. Sarah felt loved and needed. But gradually, something started to change, first subtly, then more noticeably. David became more withdrawn, irritable. His phone was always with him, and he never left it unattended. If Sarah asked what was wrong, he brushed it off: work, problems, stress. And she believed him. She wanted to believe. The supermarket was big, modern, with wide aisles and bright lighting. They went inside, grabbed a cart, and Sarah pulled out the shopping list she'd made that morning. David walked beside her, occasionally tossing something of his choice into the cart: a bag of chips, a bottle of soda. Sarah selected products methodically, checking her list. She enjoyed the process, slowly walking through the aisles, picking fresh vegetables, reading labels, finding something new and interesting. They moved slowly through the sections. Sarah picked vegetables, weighed tomatoes, sorted cucumbers. These are too soft, but these are just right. She put a few cucumbers in a bag, weighed them, stuck on the price tag. In the dairy section, she grabbed cottage cheese, kefir, sour cream. David stood nearby, but seemed distracted. He kept pulling out his phone, checking something, typing messages. The phone screen glowed in his hands, and Sarah saw his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. Who was he texting? About what? Are you waiting for something? Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. Huh? No, just a colleague promised to send some documents, he replied, slipping the phone into his pocket. She nodded and continued selecting products. They reached the bread and bakery section. The smell of fresh baked goods was so homey, so comforting. Sarah grabbed a loaf and a few cinnamon rolls. David liked them with tea. She always tried to do nice things for him, cared for him, cooked his favorite dishes. Maybe she tried too hard. Maybe he took it for granted. David suddenly stopped and frowned, looking at his phone screen. His face tensed, brows furrowed. I need to take this call, he said sharply. It's important. I'll step away for a minute. Okay, I'll head to the checkout in the meantime, Sarah said. David nodded and quickly headed toward the exit from the shopping area, pressing the phone to his ear. Sarah watched him go. Something in his behavior seemed strange, but she couldn't pinpoint what. Maybe just fatigue. Maybe really a work issue. She tried to shake off the uneasy thoughts and push the cart further. She still needed to get meat and fish. Sarah approached the refrigerated displays, examining the packages. Here's some good chicken, fresh, and salmon. We could bake it in the oven with veggies. She put the products in the cart and headed to the checkouts. The line was short, just 2 people ahead. Sarah got in line, glancing at the magazine racks and candy bars by the register. The covers showed smiling happy couples, promising perfect dinner recipes and tips for saving a marriage. She smirked to herself, as if it were all that simple. Ahead stood an elderly woman with a full cart of groceries. The cashier rang up items slowly, methodically. The woman rummaged in her purse, pulling out her wallet, counting change. Sarah waited patiently, lost in thought about how their life with David had changed. How she felt lonely even when he was around, how they hadn't really talked, laughed together, or made plans for the future in a long time. The line moved, and soon Sarah was unloading her purchases onto the conveyor belt. The cashier, a young girl with a tired face, started scanning the items. Beep, beep, beep. The monotonous sound of the scanner was soothing. Sarah looked toward the exit, trying to spot David, but he was nowhere in sight. Probably the conversation dragged on. That'll be $50.40, the cashier said. Sarah pulled out her card and tapped it on the terminal. The transaction went through successfully. She took the bags of groceries, placed them in the cart, and headed toward the exit. David still hadn't appeared. Probably a really important talk. Sarah stopped by the stand with promotional flyers, deciding to wait for him there. She pulled out her phone, checked the time. It had been about 10 minutes since he stepped away. That was odd. His business calls usually didn't take that long. Another minute passed, then another. She started to get nervous. Where was he? Maybe something happened. Sarah pulled out her phone to call him, but at that moment, an elderly man in a security guard uniform approached her. He was short, a bit stout, around 60, with gray hair and kind eyes. His face was weathered, tired, but his gaze was attentive and perceptive. His badge read John Peterson. "Excuse me," he said quietly, stepping closer. "You came with a man, right?" Sarah looked at him in surprise. Her heart skipped a beat for some reason. Something in the guard's voice alarmed her. "Yes, with my husband." "What's wrong?" The guard hesitated, clearly choosing his words. He looked around, making sure no one was listening, and turned back to Sarah. His face showed concern, even some compassion, which scared her even more. John Peterson sighed heavily. He looked her in the eyes, and Sarah saw something like pity in his gaze. That scared her even more. "Come with me, dear," he said quietly. "It's about your husband. You better see this for yourself." Sarah's heart sank. Something in the voice of this elderly guard, in his sad look, in the way he called her dear, made her alert. She felt a chill run down her spine, her hands suddenly sweaty from a burst of sweat. "What's happened?" she asked, and her voice trembled. "What do you want to show me? Is he okay?" "Come on, I'll explain everything," John Peterson said, gently taking her by the elbow. "Just not here. Let's go to the back office. We can talk calmly there." Sarah was confused. Her first impulse was to refuse, find David, ask him what was going on. But something in the guard's behavior convinced her to trust him. Maybe it was his expression. Maybe intuition telling her this man meant no harm. Maybe it was his tone, caring, fatherly, full of genuine concern. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll go with you." John Peterson nodded and led her through the store to a service door that regular shoppers just passed by without noticing. The door was gray, unremarkable, with a staff-only sign. The guard pulled out a key, opened the door, and they entered a narrow hallway with dim lighting. It smelled musty, a mix of cleaning supplies and old paint. The walls were painted pale green, the floor covered in worn linoleum. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What was happening? Why was the guard acting so strangely? What was he going to show her? 1,000 thoughts raced through her head, each more frightening than the last. Maybe something happened to David. Maybe he got into some trouble. Maybe he was caught stealing. No, that's nonsense. David would never steal anything. They walked down the hallway and entered a small room. It was the security office, several monitors on a desk showing feeds from surveillance cameras, an old couch against the wall, a table with the thermos and mugs. The walls had schedules, instructions, shift rosters. Everything was very simple and functional. In the corner stood an old fan. On the windowsill a dried-up ficus in a plastic pot. "Please have a seat," John Peterson said, pointing to a chair by the monitors. Sarah sat, not taking her eyes off the guard. Her hands were shaking, and she clenched them into fists to hide the nervousness. Her mouth was dry, and she swallowed, trying to cope with the rising panic. "What's happened?" she asked again, her voice hoarse. "Please tell me. You're scaring me." John Peterson closed the door and approached the monitors. He paused, gathering his thoughts, and Sarah saw him sigh heavily, the wrinkles on his forehead deepening. Then he turned to her. "You see, dear," he began quietly, "I've been working here for 5 years. In that time, I've seen all sorts of things, and I've learned to read people pretty well. It comes with experience, you know. When you see thousands of people every day, you start noticing details that others miss." Sarah listened without interrupting, though inside she was twisting with anxiety. She wanted him to get to the point quickly, but at the same time, she feared what he would say. "When you and your husband came into the store," John Peterson continued, "I noticed right away. I don't know why, but something seemed off about his behavior. He was too tense, checked his phone too often, glanced around nervously. I've had enough life experience to know when someone's hiding something." Sarah felt everything inside her flip upside down. She wanted to object, say the guard was mistaken, that David was just tired, that he had work issues. But the words stuck in her throat. "When he stepped away from you, I followed him on the cameras," John Peterson went on, his voice even quieter. "Just out of curiosity, you know. I didn't want to meddle in other people's business, but something inside told me to check, and I saw something that really concerned me. He met with a woman in the far corner of the store, near the home goods section. They were talking, and the conversation seemed suspicious. Very suspicious. Sarah felt the ground slip away from under her feet. Blood rushed to her face, then drained just as quickly, and the room started to swim before her eyes. "What woman?" she whispered. "What are you talking about?" "I'll show you," the guard said, turning to the monitors. "Our cameras have audio recording. Not everywhere, of course, but in some spots. It's a security requirement to capture everything that happens in the store. And right in that corner where they were talking, one of those cameras is installed. I listened to their conversation and realized I had to show it to you. I couldn't just stay silent." He pressed a few buttons on the remote, rewinding the footage. Sarah sat frozen, unable to move. Her mind refused to believe what was happening. This must be a mistake, some misunderstanding. David couldn't be betraying her. He couldn't. "Here, watch," John Peterson said quietly, pointing to one of the monitors. Sarah shifted her gaze to the screen and froze. On the monitor screen, she saw David. He was standing in the far corner of the store, near the shelves with plastic containers and kitchenware. Next to him was a woman. Sarah had never seen her before. She was an elegant lady in her 40s, in an expensive coat and high-heeled shoes. Her hair was styled in a neat updo, her makeup impeccable. She looked confident, businesslike, successful. David stood very close to her, too close for just an acquaintance. They were talking, and from their postures, the way they leaned toward each other, it was clear this wasn't a chance meeting. Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away from the screen. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it would jump out of her chest. Her hands went cold, her mouth even drier. "I'll turn on the audio now," John Peterson said quietly. "Prepare yourself, dear. What you're about to hear will be hard." He adjusted the volume, and sound flowed from the speakers. At first, only the general hum of the store, distant voices of shoppers, cartwheels, music from the speakers. Then David's voice came through, and Sarah recognized it immediately. This voice she had heard every day for 7 years. The voice that said, "I love you," that wished her good morning, that promised to be there always. "Everything's going according to plan," David was saying. And there wasn't a drop of the warmth he usually used with Sarah. His voice was cold, businesslike, calculating. "I've already started preparing the documents. Found the right lawyer who's agreed to help for a certain fee." "And when will it be ready?" the woman asked. Her voice was low, confident, with a slight rasp. "We don't have much time. The apartment needs to be transferred to you by the end of the month, or the whole plan will fall apart." Sarah felt everything inside her clench. The apartment. Her apartment. What are they talking about? "It'll all be done on time," David replied. "The lawyer's already starting on the fake debt documents. We'll make it look like Sarah has huge debts to several creditors. There'll be shell companies, of course, but the papers will look completely legit." The woman nodded, a satisfied smile appearing on her face. "Smart. And then? Then we file in court for her to be declared incompetent," David continued. And Sarah couldn't believe these words were coming from her husband. Debts, stress, inability to handle financial obligations. Plus, I'll find a couple of doctor friends who'll confirm she has mental issues. For money, people will sign anything. And then you'll be appointed guardian, the woman finished. You'll get full control over her assets. The apartment will go to you, and we can sell it. Split the money 50-50, as agreed. Sarah listened to this conversation, and it felt like a nightmare. This couldn't be true. This couldn't be her David. The man she shared a bed with, cooked breakfasts for, planned a future with. Does she suspect anything? The woman asked, glancing around. David smirked, and that smirk was full of contempt. Sarah. She's too trusting and naive to suspect a thing. She believes every word I say. The perfect victim, honestly. I've been preparing for this moment for 7 years. 7 years pretending to be the loving husband, putting up with her nagging, her endless pointless talks. And now, finally, it's all coming to a close. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. 7 years. 7 years, he pretended. 7 years of her life were a lie. Everything she believed in, everything she thought was real, turned out to be a carefully planned deception. Are you sure the court will side with us? The woman asked. This is serious business. Declaring someone incompetent isn't that easy. I have connections, David replied. The judge handling the case has already gotten his cut. He'll rule in our favor. The main thing is the documents look convincing, and the lawyer I hired specializes in exactly these kinds of cases. He's pulled off similar schemes before. He has a whole network of shell companies that supposedly issued loans. How much can we get for the apartment? The woman asked, her voice laced with outright greed. At least $130,000, David answered. Apartment in a good neighborhood, renovated, good size. Buyers for that kind of place are always around. $65,000 each. Not bad for 7 years of work, right? The woman laughed. You've always been practical, Dave. That's why I value you. Not like those sentimental fools who believe in love and fidelity. Love and fidelity, David snorted. Fairy tales for the naive. In life, only money and connections matter. Everything else is empty chatter. Sarah sat in front of the monitor, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away, didn't try to stop them. She just stared at the screen and listened as the person she trusted more than anyone calmly discussed her destruction. Not physical destruction, no, that would be too crude. He planned to destroy her as a person, strip her of everything she had, turn her into a helpless dependent victim. When do we start the active phase? The woman asked. Next week, David replied. The lawyer's already preparing the documents. A few more days, and we'll start filing fake lawsuits from the creditors. Sarah will get the summonses. Of course she'll be in shock. I'll play the caring husband trying to help her. Say I'll negotiate with the creditors, pay off the debts. But of course, nothing will work out. The debts will grow, interest will accrue. And if she refuses to sign the power of attorney? The woman asked. She won't refuse, David said confidently. She trusts me. Plus, I'll gradually convince her she has issues with her head. Say she's become forgetful, scattered, that something's wrong with her. I'll start booking her appointments with therapists who'll give the right diagnosis. In a couple of months, we'll have enough medical reports to file in court for her to be declared incompetent. Sarah closed her eyes. It was all so monstrous, so unbelievable. It seemed like fiction, a bad movie script. But this was reality. Her reality. And what then? The woman asked. After we sell the apartment. Divorce, David replied simply. I'll file for divorce, take my share of the money, and disappear. By then, she'll be officially declared incompetent, so she won't be able to make any claims. They'll assign some social services guardian and let them deal with her. Harsh, the woman said, but there wasn't a drop of sympathy in her voice. It was more a statement of fact. Life's harsh, David replied. The smart and calculating survive. Sarah's too soft, too trusting. People like that are perfect victims. I figured that out a long time ago. Even when we first met, I assessed the situation right away. Lonely, no parents, with an apartment in her name. Perfect setup. I deliberately started courting her, saying pretty words, giving flowers. Women fall for that stuff so easily. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the screen. David stood there in his usual jacket. In jeans she had washed and ironed herself. His face was calm, even pleased. He was smiling at this woman, and there was nothing human in that smile. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered his prey and was already savoring victory. So, in a month it'll all be over? The woman asked. Max 2, David replied. Courts sometimes drag things out, but we've got it all covered. Judge, lawyers, doctors all got their money. The system works flawlessly. The key is not to rush and do everything carefully. The woman nodded. Good. I'm waiting for results. And remember, no mistakes. If something goes wrong, we'll both be in a very bad spot. It'll all be clean, David assured her. I've thought through every detail. Sarah won't even realize what happened until it's too late. They talked a bit more about details, discussed some documents, amounts, timelines. Sarah listened as if through cotton. The words reached her, but she couldn't process them anymore. Inside, she felt empty. 7 years of her life turned out to be a deception. The person she loved, who slept next to her, who she shared everything with, turned out to be a monster coldly planning her destruction. John Peterson turned off the audio and turned to Sarah. His face was full of sympathy and sorrow. I'm sorry, dear, he said quietly. I know how hard this is. But you had to know. I couldn't let this happen. I've seen too many stories like this. People lose everything: homes, money, dignity because of scoundrels like that. Sarah was silent. She couldn't speak. Her throat tightened. Words wouldn't come. Tears kept flowing, but she didn't notice them. You need to act fast, John Peterson continued. You have evidence. This recording, it's stored in our system, dated, certified. It's an official document. With evidence like this, you can protect yourself. But you need to act now, before they start carrying out their plan. Sarah lifted her eyes to him. Her eyes were red from tears, her face pale. What do I do? She whispered. I don't know what to do. John Peterson crouched down beside her to be eye level. He placed his large, warm hand on her shoulder. Right now, you'll record this video on your phone, he said firmly. I'll help you. It'll be your evidence. Then you'll go back to the floor as if nothing happened. Don't let him know you know. That's very important. He mustn't suspect anything. But I can't, Sarah whispered. I can't stand next to him and pretend everything's fine. I'm not an actress. You can, John Peterson said firmly. You're stronger than you think, and I'll help you. Right now, the main thing is to stay calm. You'll go out to him, say I held you up for some formality, checking the receipt, whatever. He won't suspect a thing. And then, when you get home, or even right here in the store, you'll call the police. Sarah nodded. Her hands were still shaking, but something new was igniting in her chest. Not just pain and hurt. Anger, fury. How dare he? How dare he treat her like this? She loved him, cared for him, trusted him. And all this time, he was planning her destruction. Help me record this, she said, and her voice grew stronger. Right now. John Peterson nodded and took her phone. His fingers, accustomed to tech, quickly found the right functions. He pointed the phone camera at the monitor and played the recording again. Sarah watched the screen on her phone, which mirrored the monitor. David and that woman were talking again, discussing their vile plan. John Peterson recorded the whole thing, video and audio, all their words, all the details of their scheme. Done, he said, handing her the phone. Now you have evidence. Save it in several places, email it to yourself, upload to the cloud. So even if something happens to the phone, the recording doesn't disappear. Sarah nodded and quickly emailed the video to herself. Her hands shook, but she managed. Then she uploaded it to cloud storage. Now the recording was safe. What do I do next? She asked. Call the police right now. John Peterson thought for a moment. You can call right here, he said. It'll be even better. While he's in the store, while that woman is here too. They can detain both. The police will have the video from our cameras and your recording on the phone. The evidence will be rock solid. Sarah took a deep breath. Her heart pounded, but now it wasn't fear. It was determination. She wouldn't let them destroy her life. She wouldn't let this scoundrel take everything she had. Okay, she said firmly. I'll call the police. Right now. John Peterson nodded approvingly. Good for you, dear. You're doing the right thing. And I'll be right here. If you need help, I'm always around. Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed the police. Her fingers no longer shook. She was calm, focused. When the dispatcher answered, she explained the situation clearly and concisely. Attempted fraud, planning a crime, video evidence, store address, descriptions of the suspects. The dispatcher promised a unit would arrive in 10 minutes. They're on their way, Sarah said, lowering the phone. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Good, John Peterson said. Now we need to make sure your husband and that woman don't leave. I'll go to the floor and keep an eye on them. If they try to go, I'll hold them up with some excuse. You sit here, calm down. When the police arrive, we'll go out together. Sarah nodded. John Peterson patted her on the shoulder and left the room. She was left alone. She sat in the chair and closed her eyes. A storm of emotions raged inside: pain, anger, hurt, disappointment. 7 years. 7 years she was deceived. 7 years she lived with a man who was actually her enemy. But now wasn't the time for tears. Now was the time to act. She wiped her eyes, straightened her back. She wasn't a victim. She wouldn't let them turn her into one. She had evidence, she had support, and she would fight. Sarah sat in the security room, trying to gather her thoughts. 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes until the police arrived. But those minutes felt like eternity. She looked at the monitors, showing different corners of the store. Somewhere out there, among the ordinary shoppers, walked the man she thought was her husband, the man planning to ruin her life. She took a deep breath, trying to stop the tremble in her hands. She needed to pull herself together. Couldn't show weakness. Not now. Sarah stood up from the chair and approached the small mirror hanging on the wall. Her face was pale, eyes red from tears. She splashed cold water on her face from the sink in the corner, dabbed it with a towel. Needed to look normal. David mustn't suspect anything. About 5 minutes passed. Sarah looked at the monitors again. John Peterson stood by the exit, carefully watching the store floor. David appeared on one of the camera feeds. He was walking between aisles, clearly looking for her. His face showed slight irritation, probably wondering where she'd gone. That woman was visible on another monitor, standing by the magazine rack, scrolling through something on her phone. Sarah clenched her fists. How calmly they were acting. How confidently. They didn't even suspect their plan was exposed. That in a few minutes, their lives would change forever. Her phone buzzed. Sarah jumped and looked at the screen. David. He was calling her. She hesitated for a second, then answered, trying to sound as normal as possible. Hello. Where are you? David's voice was annoyed. I've been looking for you for 10 minutes. Did you get lost in the store? Sorry, Sarah said, surprised at how steady her own voice sounded. The security guard held me up. Some issue with the receipt. With the receipt, David repeated. What issue? Some system error, Sarah lied. They say an item scanned twice. They're checking. I'll be free soon. Fine, David grumbled. I'm waiting by the exit. Just hurry up, I have things to do today. Things to do. Probably a meeting with the lawyer preparing fake documents. Or with the doctor supposed to give her a phony diagnosis. He had things to do. Okay, I'll be there soon, Sarah said and hung up. She placed the phone on the table and looked at the monitors again. David was heading toward the exit, hands in his jacket pockets. An ordinary guy just waiting for his wife after shopping. None of the passing shoppers could imagine this man was a fraudster, planning to steal his wife's apartment, destroy her life. A few more minutes passed. Sarah heard sirens outside. The police. They're here. Her heart beat faster. Now everything would be decided. Now she'd find out if her evidence was enough, if they'd believe her, if they could do something. John Peterson entered the room. The police are here, he said. I'll bring them in now. You ready? Sarah nodded. Ready. The guard left, and a minute later, 2 officers entered the room, a middle-aged man in uniform and a young female officer. Their faces were serious, professional. Good afternoon, the senior officer said. You called the police, reported an attempted fraud. Yes, that was me, Sarah said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. I have evidence. My husband. He's planning to steal my apartment. Fake debts, declare me incompetent. The officers exchanged glances. Do you have evidence for these claims? The female officer asked. Yes. Sarah pulled out her phone. I have a video recording. He was talking to his accomplice right here in the store. The cameras caught it all. They discussed the whole plan in detail. She showed the officers the video. They watched attentively, listened. Their faces showed serious concern. When the recording ended, the senior officer nodded. This is really serious, he said. Planning fraud, forging documents, possibly corruption if they really bribed a judge. Where are your husband and this woman now? In the store floor, John Peterson answered. I've been keeping an eye on them via cameras. The man's waiting by the exit. The woman's in the magazine section. Good, the officer said. We'll detain them now for questioning. You'll need to give a statement at the station. But let's handle this here first. Sarah nodded. Everything inside her tightened into a knot. Now she'd see David. See his face when he realized everything was exposed. Part of her feared this encounter. But another part, the one full of anger and hurt, wanted it. Wanted to see his confidence crumble. That smug smile vanish from his face. The officers left the room, and Sarah followed. John Peterson walked beside her, quietly encouraging, It'll be okay, dear. You're doing the right thing. They entered the store floor. Sarah saw David. He was standing by the exit, looking at something on his phone. Ordinary pose, ordinary expression. Nothing unusual. Just a man waiting for his wife. The officers headed toward him. Sarah walked behind, feeling her legs turn to jelly. David looked up, saw the approaching officers, and frowned. Then his gaze fell on Sarah walking behind them, and confusion flashed in his eyes. David Walker? The senior officer asked. Yes, that's me, David replied warily. What's this about? You need to come with us for questioning, the officer said. There's information about planning fraud. David's face changed. First complete confusion, then growing anxiety. He looked at Sarah, his eyes a mix of incomprehension and emerging fear. What are you talking about? He asked, trying to sound indignant. What fraud? I don't understand. We'll explain everything at the station, the officer said firmly. For now, please come with us. Sarah, David turned to her, pleading notes in his voice. What's going on? Can you explain this nonsense? Sarah looked at him, a storm of emotions boiling inside. Pain, anger, disappointment. This man had shared her bed for 7 years. 7 years saying words of love. And now, he stood before her pretending he didn't understand. I know everything, Dave, she said quietly, but firmly. I know about your plan. The fake debts. How you wanted to declare me incompetent and take the apartment. David's face paled. For a second, raw fear flashed in his eyes, but he quickly composed himself. What are you talking about? He tried to protest. What debts? What incompetence? Sarah, have you lost your mind? I have a recording of your conversation, Sarah said, her voice stronger. The whole conversation. Where you discussed every detail with that woman. The store cameras recorded it all. Audio too. David froze. The color drained from his face completely. He opened his mouth, but said nothing. His eyes showed total shock, realization that everything had collapsed, his perfect plan failed. This is some misunderstanding, he muttered weakly. You got it wrong. I got it right, Sarah cut him off. 7 years, Dave. 7 years you deceived me. Pretended to be a loving husband. And really, You were just waiting for the moment to take everything I have." Meanwhile, the female officer headed toward the magazine section where that elegant woman stood. Sarah saw her approach. The woman look up in surprise, start saying something indignantly, but the officer was unyielding. A minute later, both were walking toward the exit. David looked at the approaching woman, panic in his eyes. Everything was crumbling. His carefully built plan was falling apart right now. In front of dozens of shoppers curiously watching the scene. "David," the woman looked at him in confusion. "What's happening?" "Shut up," he hissed. "Don't say anything." But it was too late. The senior officer addressed both. "We have a video recording of your conversation where you discuss a fraud plan. You're both being detained for questioning. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you." The elegant woman tried to protest. "This is absurd. I don't understand what this is about. I was just shopping." "In that case, you can explain everything at the station," the officer replied calmly. "But we have a recording of your conversation with this man, discussing a plan to seize someone else's property." The woman looked at David with fury. "You idiot," she hissed. "You said it'd be clean." "Shut up," David snapped, and the mask of the charming man finally slipped off him. Now before Sarah stood a different person, angry, scared, cornered. The officers led both toward the exit. Shoppers parted, watching curiously. Someone was filming on their phone. Sarah followed, feeling a strange emptiness inside. She thought she'd feel relief, satisfaction in this moment. But instead, there was only fatigue and endless sadness. Outside stood police cars with flashing lights. David and the woman were placed in separate cars. Before getting in, David turned and looked at Sarah. His gaze was a mix of anger and something like pleading. "Sarah," he called, "wait. We can talk this out. It's not what you think." Sarah stopped a few steps away from him, looked into his eyes, those eyes she fell in love with 7 years ago. That seemed so honest and kind. "No, Dave," she said quietly. "It is exactly what I think. And worse. You didn't just betray me. You stole 7 years of my life, made me believe in something that never existed. I loved you. And you. You just used me." "It's not like that," he started. But the officer stopped him, gently but firmly seating him in the car. Sarah watched the cars with flashing lights drive away. Then she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned. It was John Peterson. "Good job, dear," he said warmly. "You handled it. It wasn't easy. But you found the strength." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, tears welling up again. "If not for you, I wouldn't have known anything." He would have carried out his plan. "I just did what I had to," John Peterson replied. "You can't stand by when injustice is happening. And now you need to be strong. Ahead of you are statements, court, divorce. But you'll manage. I believe in you." Sarah nodded, wiping her tears. Yes, there were many difficulties ahead, but the worst was behind her. Now she knew the truth. As bitter as it was the truth. And with that truth, she could move forward. "You need to go to the station," the approaching young officer said. "Give a full statement, sign the report. We can provide a ride." "Thank you," Sarah said. "I'll go." She turned to John Peterson and, unexpectedly for herself, hugged him. The old man was a bit surprised but returned the hug, patting her on the back. "Thank you," she said again. "Thank you for everything." "No problem, dear," he replied. "If you need anything, I'm always here. Come by, tell me how things are going." Sarah nodded and walked to the police car. She sat in the back seat, and the car pulled away. She looked out the window at the passing streets, buildings, people. Life went on. Her life went on. And now, with the lie exposed, she could start building it anew. This time on an honest foundation, without deception, without betrayal. At the police station, she spent several hours, gave detailed statements, told everything she knew about David, about their life together. handed over the video recording she made at the store. Experts confirmed its authenticity. The original recordings from the store cameras were also seized as evidence. The investigator, a woman in her 40s with a tired but attentive face, listened to everything and said, "We have enough grounds to open a criminal case. Planning fraud on a large scale, possible document forgery, they've already started fake debts." "And what's next?" Sarah asked. "They'll be held in custody until trial, unless the judge decides to release them on bail," the investigator explained. "But given the seriousness of the charges and flight risk, they'll likely stay in jail. You'll need to appear for questioning as needed, then testify in court. I also recommend filing for divorce as soon as possible and securing your assets." "I'll do that," Sarah said. When she left the station, it was already dark. The sky was covered in clouds, a fine rain drizzling. Sarah stood on the station steps, looking at the lit store windows, passing cars. People hurrying about their business. Each had their own life, their own problems, joys and sorrows. And she had hers, a life she now had to reassemble. She pulled out her phone and called a cab. Going home felt strange. Home, where everything reminded her of David, of their shared life that turned out to be a lie. But it was her home, her apartment, and she wouldn't let anyone take it from her. Sarah arrived home late in the evening. The apartment greeted her with silence and darkness. She turned on the light and looked around. Everything was in its place: the couch where she and David watched movies in the evenings, the kitchen table where they had breakfast in the mornings, photos on the shelves capturing moments of their supposedly happy life together. Every item reminded her of the past, which turned out to be an illusion. Sarah went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and closed her eyes. Fatigue hit her hard, physical and emotional. She felt drained, empty, but at the same time, something new stirred inside: relief. A strange, contradictory relief that the truth had finally come out. No more wondering why David had grown colder, why he always hid his phone, why he stayed late so often. Now she knew the answers to all those questions. The next day, Sarah went to a lawyer. She found an experienced family law specialist online, Susan Victoria, a woman in her 50s with a serious face and attentive gaze. The office smelled of coffee and paper, shelves lined with legal reference books. "Tell me everything in order," Susan Victoria said, opening her notebook. Sarah told her everything about meeting David, 7 years together, that day at the store, the camera recording, the arrest. The lawyer listened attentively, occasionally making notes. "You did absolutely the right thing," she said when Sarah finished. "You have rock-solid evidence. A video recording with the crime plan clearly captured. That's a very strong position. Now we need to act fast. First, file for divorce immediately. Second, secure your assets, put a hold on any transactions with the apartment. Third, if they've already started fake debts, we need to contest all those documents." "But how do I know if they've done anything yet?" Sarah asked. "We'll request a property records extract. Check for any liens on your real estate," the lawyer explained. "Also, pull your credit report. See if any loans were taken in your name. If we find anything, we'll challenge it as fraudulent." Sarah nodded. Her head spun from the flood of legal terms and procedures. But Susan Victoria patiently explained everything. "How long will all this take?" Sarah asked. "Divorce a few months. The criminal case against your husband and his accomplice could drag on longer. Up to a year or more," the lawyer replied. "But the main thing, your assets will be protected. They won't be able to do anything." In the following days, Sarah felt like she was living in some parallel world. During the day, she went to officers, notary, registry, lawyers, police for more questioning. In the evenings, she returned home and mechanically did routine tasks: cooked dinner, cleaned, watched TV, but saw and heard nothing. Her thoughts kept returning to David, to those 7 years she thought were happy. Her friend Olivia, learning what happened, rushed over that same evening with a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates. "Sarah, I can't believe it," she said, sitting in the kitchen. David seemed so normal. "I'd never have thought he was capable of this." "Neither did I," Sarah replied quietly. 7 years, Liv. 7 years he played the role. And I noticed nothing. "Don't blame yourself," Olivia took her hand. "It's not your fault. He's a professional con artist. He knows how to deceive." "But I should have noticed something," Sarah shook her head. "Some signs, some oddities. They must have been there." "Hindsight always makes signs easy to spot," Olivia said. "You loved him, you trusted him. That's normal. And he took advantage of your trust. He's the monster, not you." They sat in the kitchen late into the night, drinking wine, reminiscing. Olivia told funny stories, trying to cheer Sarah up, and sometimes it worked. Sarah caught herself laughing, and it felt strange. How could she laugh when there was such emptiness inside? 2 weeks passed. Sarah filed the divorce papers. David was in custody, but had the right to send a representative to court. The lawyer warned he might try to drag out the process, make counterclaims for asset division. "Let them try," Susan Victoria said. "We have evidence of his fraudulent intentions. The court will consider that." The criminal investigation moved forward. It turned out David and his accomplice, named Marina Crawford, had already started implementing the plan. They found contracts with shell credit companies that supposedly issued loans to Sarah for large amounts. The documents were skillfully forged, signatures faked. They also found the lawyer who prepared those papers. He was arrested and gave statements in exchange for a lighter sentence. "This isn't their first scam," the investigator told her during one questioning. "Crawford's pulled off similar schemes before. She has a whole network of fake creditors, corrupt doctors, bribed officials. Your husband met her through mutual acquaintances and got pulled in. So he married me on purpose?" Sarah asked. "Planned this from the start." The investigator paused. "From Crawford's statements she's started talking, yes. They targeted you before even meeting. Lonely woman with her own home in a good area. David was supposed to gain trust, marry, wait for the right moment. 7 years is a long time, but for them, it was an investment. They planned to get an apartment worth over $100,000. Sarah listened, and inside grew not pain, but anger. Cold, clear anger. Her life was just a business project to them. An investment. 7 years of pretense for money. "But there's good news," the investigator continued. "We found the judge they supposedly bribed. He denies taking a bribe, and it's not proven yet. Maybe they were just bragging. But the planning of fraud and document forgery is proven solid. They're both facing real time." Months passed. Sarah gradually returned to life. She started going to work. She was an accountant at a small company, and colleagues, learning of her situation, showed sympathy and support. Work helped distract her, not think about what happened. Numbers, reports, documents all required focus and left no time for self-doubt. In the evenings, she began sorting David's things. His clothes, books, some personal items. All of it needed to be cleared from the apartment. Sarah packed everything into boxes, and each item brought memories. This shirt, he wore it for their anniversary. This book, they read it aloud together in the evenings. Every item was tied to some story, some moment of their shared life. A life that turned out to be fake. It was especially hard sorting photos. Their joint shots at the beach, in the mountains, a friends' birthdays. In all the photos, they looked happy. David hugged her, smiled at the camera. And in all those smiles, all those hugs, there wasn't a drop of truth. Just acting. Just a role he played masterfully. Sarah gathered all the photos and put them in a box on the far shelf of the closet. Didn't throw them away, couldn't. But didn't want to look at them anymore. 4 months after that memorable day at the store, the divorce court hearing took place. David was brought to court from jail. Sarah saw him for the first time since the arrest. He had changed a lot, lost weight, looked haggard, with stubble. His clothes were rumpled, prison issue. When their eyes met, David tried to smile, but it came out pitiful, forced. "Sarah," he called when they were led into the courtroom. "Can I talk to you?" Lawyer Susan Victoria touched Sarah's arm warningly, but she nodded. "Fine, talk." David approached closer. The guard watched him warily. "Sarah, I know you hate me," he began quietly, "and you have every reason. But I want you to know not everything was a lie. The first years, I really grew attached to you. You're good. You were a good wife. But not good enough not to rob me," Sarah said coldly. David lowered his eyes. "I got into this mess stupidly. Marina, she convinced me. Said it was easy money, nothing bad would happen. I didn't think it'd turn out like this. You prepared for 7 years to steal my apartment," Sarah said, her voice steady. 7 years pretending. And now you want to say it was stupidity. No, Dave. It was your choice. And now you're facing the consequences. "I'm sorry," David said, tears in his voice. "Forgive me. Please. I know I don't deserve it, but—" "No," Sarah cut him off. "You don't deserve it. And I don't forgive. You stole 7 years of my life, made me believe in something that didn't exist. The only thing I regret is not seeing through you sooner." The guard touched David's shoulder. "Move to your seat." David obediently went to the defendant's bench. Sarah watched his back and felt nothing. Emptiness. This man no longer evoked love or hate in her. Only fatigue and a desire to end this story soon. The court hearing was short. David didn't contest the divorce, made no demands. His lawyer was passive. Half an hour later, the judge announced the decision. Marriage dissolved. All assets remain with Sarah, as the apartment was her property before marriage, and evidence of the defendant's fraudulent intentions exclude any claims to division. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to her lawyer as they left the courtroom. "You're welcome," Susan Victoria smiled. "You did great. Held yourself with dignity." Sarah left the courthouse and breathed deeply. Spring. The sun shone brightly, first leaves budding on trees, the air smelling of renewal. She was free. Officially, legally free from the man who deceived her for so many years. The criminal trial against David and Marina Crawford took place 6 months later. Sarah attended as a witness and victim, gave testimony, answered questions from the prosecutor and defense attorneys, told how it all happened, how the elderly security guard saved her from disaster. The court was strict. The evidence was irrefutable: camera video, witness statements, found fake documents. David was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Marina Crawford to 7. As it turned out, she was the organizer and had done similar scams before. When Sarah left the courtroom after the verdict, she felt the weight that had hung on her shoulders all these months finally lift. Justice had prevailed. The people who planned to destroy her life were punished. That evening, Sarah went to that same supermarket where it all started, found John Peterson at his usual post by the entrance. The old man was delighted to see her. "Dear," he exclaimed, "so glad to see you. How are things? How'd the trial go?" "It's all over," Sarah said, a genuine smile appearing on her face for the first time in a long while. "He was convicted. 6 years. I'm free." John Peterson hugged her fatherly. "Good job. I knew you'd manage. You're a strong woman." "Thanks to you," Sarah said. "If not for you, I shudder to think what would have happened to me. I just did what I had to." John Peterson repeated the words he said that memorable day. "But you keep going forward, Liv. You're still young, your whole life ahead." Sarah nodded. She pulled a box of chocolates and a bouquet of flowers from her bag. "This is for you, as a token of gratitude. I know no gifts can express what I feel, but thank you, dear." John Peterson accepted the gifts, tears glistening in his eyes. "Thank you. Come by again, okay? Tell me how life's treating you." "I definitely will," Sarah promised. Life gradually got back on track. Sarah renovated the apartment, changed the wallpaper, bought new furniture, wanted to erase all traces of the past, create something new, her own. The apartment transformed, brighter, cozier. New paintings on the walls, new curtains, new pillows on the couch. All new, clean, without memories. At work, she got promoted to head accountant. Sarah agreed. Work took more time, but that was good. Less time left for sad thoughts. Friend Olivia introduced her to her cousin Alex, a construction engineer. Tall, calm man with kind eyes. They met at a cafe, had coffee, talked. Alex turned out to be an interesting conversationalist, told about his work, building sites, how structures rise from the ground. Sarah listened and thought how long it had been since she had such simple, light conversations. They started dating. Not often, once a week, sometimes less. Went to movies, cafes, walked in the park. Alex didn't rush, didn't pressure. He understood Sarah had been through tough trials and needed time. And she was grateful for that understanding. A year passed since that day at the store. A year that changed her whole life. Sarah sat on the balcony of her renovated apartment, sipping tea, watching the sunset. The sky was pink, clouds drifting slowly, changing shape. Below, the city buzzed, cars, voices, life. She thought about what happened, how easily one could lose everything, how important it is to trust intuition, listen to warning signs, that not all people are who they seem. But she also thought that there are kind people in the world. People like John Peterson, who didn't pass by, who risked intervening. People like her friend Olivia, who supported her in a tough moment. People like Alex, who patiently waited while she healed her wounds. Her phone vibrated, a message from Alex. "How about a walk tomorrow? Forecast says good weather." Sarah smiled and typed a reply. "I'd love to." She finished her tea, stood up, and went inside the apartment. Her apartment, her fortress, her beginning. Ahead was a whole life. A life she'd build herself, on her terms, with open eyes and a vigilant heart. She had gone through the fire of betrayal and come out stronger. And now, looking back at that day in the store, she understood it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her real life. Thank you for listening to the story. This has been the channel Twists of Fate. Sorry for any mistakes. Let us know in the comments what you think. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel.